Impossible! Some of the spectators who despised Valor were stunned as they watched the horse dart away like an arrow, every last obstacle collapsing under its proud stride. The onlookers could not believe their eyes. The skinny, overlooked horse had transformed into a force of nature, winning third place in a competition they never believed it could enter. At the auction that day, Valor was the horse that received the least attention because of his appearance. Passing men either ignored him or chuckled dismissively. "That one's hopeless," one man sneered. "Not even fit to pull a cart. They probably brought him here out of pity. Better off at the slaughterhouse." The horse didn't flinch. His hollow eyes revealed no fear, only a quiet resignation. Among the bustling crowd, a determined young woman made her way forward. Claire, with chestnut hair, braided neatly and piercing eyes that sparkled with resolve, wore simple clothes, a dusty white shirt, worn jeans, and well-used riding boots. She clutched a small leather bag containing the savings she'd painstakingly gathered while working on her family's ranch. Claire paused to observe the more impressive horses, but felt no connection to them. Her grandfather, a wise and patient man who had taught her to ride, had always "Look deeper than what your eyes can see." His words echoed in her mind as she moved through the pens. When she reached the neglected corner, her steps halted. Her gaze fell on the emaciated horse. Something about the way he stood motionless, as if resigned to his fate, tugged at her heart. She approached the pen, ignoring the mocking laughter of nearby men. "What are you doing here, boy?" she murmured softly, resting her hands on the wooden rail. The horse barely lifted his head, just enough for their eyes to meet. For a moment, Claire felt a lump in her throat. Those eyes didn't just hold sadness, they carried a deeper longing, a silent plea to be noticed. "What do you see in that bag of bones?" an older man taunted, stepping closer with a smirk. "That's none of your concern," Claire replied firmly, her gaze never leaving the horse. She extended her hand cautiously. At first, the horse stiffened, but as if sensing her gentle intent, he hesitated, then slowly nudged. The touch was fleeting, but it was all Claire needed to make up her mind. When the auctioneer called for bids on the horse, the crowd murmured in subdued voices. His usual energetic tone had dimmed, reflecting the lack of interest. "Here we have a young horse that could use some care. Perhaps someone will find a use for him," he announced with little enthusiasm. The silence was deafening. No hands rose. Some chuckled quietly, others turned their backs, dismissing the offer as unworthy of consideration. Claire raised her hand. "I'll take him." The words landed like a stone in a still pond, rippling through the crowd. Faces turned toward her in disbelief. "You've got to be joking," one man scoffed. "What would you want with that thing? He's nothing but trouble." Claire ignored the jeers and approached the auctioneer. "What's the price?" she asked calmly. The man stared at her, intrigued, as though struggling to understand why anyone would want that horse. The auctioneer's gavel fell with a thud, signaling the close of the deal. "Sold," he announced, relief clear in his voice. Amid the murmurs and faint laughter that rippled through the crowd, Claire reached out with steady hands to take the rope tied to the horse. Her fingers brushed the coarse fibers as she turned to the creature, her voice soft but resolute. "From now on, your name is Valor," she murmured, stroking his muzzle with a tenderness born of conviction. "Don't worry, boy. No one's going to cast you aside ever again." As Claire led him away from the bustling marketplace, the chatter of disapproval lingered behind her. "That girl doesn't know what she's getting into. She'll regret this." The words bit at her resolve, but she didn't look back. Beside her, Valor walked with an unsteady gait, each step mirroring the uncertainty swirling in her mind. Yet, she hadn't just seen a horse, she had recognized something in him, a spirit others had failed to notice. The pair trudged along the dusty path leading to her family's ranch, the sun casting long shadows on the parched ground. Valor's legs trembled with fatigue, his frame far too thin for comfort. Claire stopped often, letting him rest while she whispered encouragement. "Easy, boy," she said, her hand gliding over his sweat-slick neck. "We're almost there. I promise you'll never have to go through this again." The road stretched ahead, flanked by dry fields and wind-bent shrubs. The solitude weighed on Claire, but her mind refused to settle. She replayed the auction in her head, the skeptical glances, the dismissive laughter, the whispers of worthless. She had spent most of her savings on valor, a decision that felt as reckless as it was necessary. But there had been something in his eyes, a quiet plea, or perhaps a reflection of... Claire had always believed that, like people, horses carried their own essence, and sometimes all they needed was someone willing to believe in them. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson. The wooden house, modest yet inviting, stood amidst a small stable and a weathered corral. On the porch, her grandfather Henry sat sharpening a well-worn tool, his hands calloused and his hair a stark white that bore the weight of years of labor. He paused as Claire approached, his sharp eyes narrowing as they took in the gaunt figure of the horse. "What's this now?" Henry asked, his voice measured, rising only slightly as he pushed himself upright. Claire stopped in front of him, her grip on Valor's rope firm. "He's mine, Grandpa," she said, her tone steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She knew Henry to be a man who spoke plainly and never sugar-coated the truth. No matter how... Henry stepped closer, circling the horse with a scrutinizing gaze. He examined Valor's legs, his dull coat, and his weary posture. The horse stood still, too drained to even flinch. "Skin and bones," Henry muttered. "Looks like he hasn't seen a decent meal in months." Claire pressed her lips together, but held her ground. "I know, Grandpa, but he just needs time, care, someone to believe in him." Henry straightened, crossing his arms as he regarded her with a mix of doubt and respect. "Time and care," he echoed. "Do you understand what you're taking on? A horse in this shape doesn't just bounce back. It's hard work, and sometimes it doesn't pan out." "I'm ready to try," Claire replied, her voice unwavering. For a moment, silence settled between them, broken only by the rustle of the wind. Valorally, Henry nodded with a sigh. "If you're so certain, then you'll feed him, train him, and make sure this gamble of yours is worth it." A smile broke across Claire's face, gratitude lighting her eyes. "Thank you, Grandpa. I won't let you down." Henry gestured toward the stable. "Put him in the small corral for now. We'll see what we can do in the morning." Claire led Valor to the corral, where she had hastily prepared a spot for him. She untied the rope and let him loose. For a moment, the horse didn't move, simply turning his head to look at her. His gaze held something, cautious curiosity, maybe even trust. Claire reached out and stroked his neck. She crouched down, pulling out a bucket filled with fresh water, and placed it in front of him. "Here you go, boy. You've earned it." Valor drank eagerly, his body relaxing with each gulp. Then Claire brought over some hay and sat on the ground, watching as he ate. In that moment, but there was something else, something others had overlooked. Despite his frailty, the way Valor held his head high and how his eyes tracked every movement around him hinted at an inner strength that hadn't been entirely extinguished. Later, when Henry came back to check on them, he found Claire asleep by the corral, leaning against the fence. Valor stood nearby, his ears slightly perked, as if keeping watch over her. Henry allowed himself a small smile. "Maybe you're right, girl," he muttered, before heading back to the house. That night, under a sky sprinkled with stars, a bond of trust and hope began to form between Claire and Valor. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but they shared something unbreakable, a belief in what they could become together, a faith untouched by others' doubts or laughter. The first weeks on the ranch, Valor arrived in such a fragile state that every day felt like a battle to earn his trust and rebuild his strength. Although he now had plenty of food and water, he barely ate at first, as though he were still adjusting to the idea of abundance. Claire began her days early, inspecting the hay and mixing it with supplements to ensure Valor regained the nutrients he so desperately needed. She spent hours sitting by his side, speaking in low tones, while the horse watched her with a blend of curiosity and lingering suspicion. "It's okay, boy. There's no one to compete with here," she whispered. "This is your time, and we're going to make it count." The first real challenge came only a few days in. One morning, Claire decided to guide Valor to the main corral so he could stretch his legs. But as soon as she tried to lead him through the gate, his body stiffened. He froze. "It's all right," she murmured, gripping the rope firmly but gently. She knew forcing him wouldn't work. Nearby, Henry leaned against the fence, his cane propped beside him, observing quietly. "That horse is broken inside," he said, after a long silence. His tone wasn't cruel, but heavy with years of understanding. "Those eyes don't lie. Someone hurt him bad, and now he thinks every step could be a trap." "Then we'll fix him," Claire replied, without looking away from Valor. "But we'll do it his way, not ours." She didn't push him any further that day. Instead, she settled herself on the ground by the gate, letting the rope rest loosely in the dust. Valor stood still at first, tense and unmoving, but gradually his posture softened. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the rustle of the wind and the occasional song of a bird. The next day, they tried again. And each small step Valor took toward the corral felt like a victory to Claire. Though the progress was painstakingly slow, she celebrated every little triumph as if it were monumental. When he finally crossed the gate, she felt a lump rise in her throat. "I knew you could do it," she whispered, stroking his neck with a smile. Rebuilding his physical strength was just as demanding. Valor, who could barely muster the energy to trot, tired quickly. Claire developed a careful plan to help him regain his stamina. At first, she led him on slow walks around the corral, always patient and observant. Gradually, she introduced short bursts of running, careful not to push him too hard. A horse doesn't just need strength in its body. It requires resilience of mind as well. If it trusts you, it'll achieve things no one thought possible. One late afternoon, while Claire was working with Valor in the paddock, her grandfather approached carrying an old wooden brush. "Need a hand with this?" he asked, holding out the brush toward her. Claire smiled and took it. As she ran her hand along Valor's back, Henry began brushing the horse's neck with slow, deliberate strokes. At first, the horse stiffened, unsure of the unfamiliar touch, but soon relaxed under the experienced rhythm of the old man's hand. "It's funny," Henry said after a while. "This horse reminds me of one I had when I was young. Just as stubborn, just as wary. But once he trusted me, I'd never known a more loyal companion." Claire looked at him with curiosity. "What happened to him?" Henry smiled, though a trace of wistfulness lingered in his expression. "He became the best horse I ever had, but that only happened because I gave him time." Never rush a horse, Claire. They teach you patience, and if you listen to them, they'll repay you tenfold. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. She was certain there was something extraordinary about this horse, even if no one else could see it. Over the months, Claire's dedication began to show its results. Under her careful attention, Valor transformed. His once thin and frail frame became strong and muscular. His dark coat regained its sheen, and his movements grew graceful and confident. But the most remarkable change was in his eyes. Where fear and resignation had once lived, there was now a spark of trust. Claire knew the journey was far from over, But with every passing day, she became more convinced she'd made the right choice at that auction. Though the path was fraught with challenges, her determination never wavered. Valor was destined for greatness. One afternoon, as Claire was leading Valor around the paddock, Henry approached with a rope and an old saddle that had been stored in the barn for years. "It's time for this guy to feel what it's like to carry a rider," he said, with a grin that was equal parts pride and challenge. Claire glanced at Valor, who stood calm, grazing with his ears relaxed. Despite all their progress, riding was a delicate step. One wrong move could undo all the trust they had painstakingly built. "Do you think he's ready?" Claire asked, her hand resting gently on Valor's neck. "We won't know until we try," Henry replied, placing the saddle on the fence. "But if anyone can do it, it's you. He believes in you." That night, Claire lay awake longer than usual, thinking about the next steps. Since the day she had brought Valor home, she had dreamed of entering him in competitive events. Not for glory, but to prove that a horse's origins didn't define its potential. Still, she was determined not to rush him. At dawn, Claire brought Valor to the paddock. First, she let him sniff and explore it. Then, with steady hands, she placed it on his back without fastening it. Valor tensed, turning his head to see what was happening. Claire spoke to him in soothing tones, her hand gliding along his side until he relaxed. It was a slow process, but every small step strengthened their bond. Once the saddle was secured, Henry stepped into the paddock. "All right, girl. Let's see how he does when you're up there." Claire nodded, but didn't climb on right away. She walked alongside Valor, guiding him around the paddock with the saddle in place. The horse stumbled a couple of times, his movements awkward under the new weight, but gradually he adjusted. Valorally, Claire took a deep breath and stood by his side. "It's okay, boy. We'll do this together." With smooth, deliberate movements, Valor froze, his muscles taut as if unsure of what to do. Claire remained calm, sitting still and giving him time to process. "That's it, boy. You're doing great," she said softly, leaning forward to stroke his neck. Valor let out a long, steady exhale. Slowly, tentatively, he began to move forward. Valor's initial steps were uncertain, wobbling slightly as he circled the pen. Yet, with every lap, a quiet confidence began to emerge. Claire felt a rush of excitement as she noticed the horse wasn't just tolerating her presence, he was starting to move naturally beneath her. From his perch by the fence, Henry watched with a look of quiet satisfaction. "See what I told you? He wasn't broken, just needed someone to remind him what he's capable of." That day marked a turning point for them both. With Valor now accepting the saddle, the next challenge. Claire knew that dressage and jumping events demanded more than just discipline and technique. They required a deep connection between horse and rider. Weeks later, it was time to venture beyond the ranch. Claire took Valor to nearby open fields, hoping to acclimate him to new terrains and sounds. Their first outing was a mess. The rustling wind through the trees and snapping branches unnerved him. At one point, he startled so suddenly that Claire almost lost her seat. "It's okay," she said, gripping the reins firmly but gently. "I've got you." Despite the setbacks, they pressed on. Day by day, Valor grew more assured, learning to trust not just Claire, but also his own body. Their bond deepened, evident to anyone who watched them. From a distance, Henry often found himself smiling. "That horse isn't just strong," he remarked to a visiting friend one day. The breakthrough came one afternoon while practicing basic jumps on a small course Claire had set up. The early attempts were clumsy, but with patience and repetition, Valor began to synchronize his movements. When he finally cleared a jump without knocking down the bars, Claire let out a triumphant cheer and threw her arms around him. "You did it, boy. I knew you could." That night, sitting on the porch under a blanket of stars, Claire allowed herself to dream of what lay ahead. They were far from ready for major competitions, but for the first time since she had bought him, she felt Valor was prepared to take on the world. The journey hadn't been easy, but together they were proving that the past didn't have to dictate the future. With enough determination and belief, no obstacle was insurmountable. For months, they had started with the basics, but now Valor was leaping gracefully over higher obstacles and executing precise movements that showcased their unique connection. Yet for Claire, the real test loomed in the competitive world. One morning, while reviewing the calendar of local equestrian events, Henry approached her with a cup of coffee in hand. "Well, have you made up your mind yet?" Claire sighed, setting the paper down. "There's a competition in town next month," she admitted, "but I'm not sure we're ready. There's still so much to refine." Henry gave her a steady look. "Listen, kid, no one starts off perfect. If you keep waiting for the perfect moment, it'll never come. Valor's ready, and so are you. The only thing left is for you to believe it." Buoyed by her grandfather's words, Claire signed up for the local event. It was a modest competition for beginners, but even so, it was a huge. The thought of performing in front of a crowd of spectators and seasoned riders made her stomach churn. The day of the competition arrived faster than she expected. Claire prepared Valor with meticulous care, brushing his coat until it gleamed in the sunlight. She adjusted his saddle carefully, double-checking every strap. "Ready, boy?" she asked, looking into his eyes. Valor responded with a soft whinny, as if he understood the importance of the day. When they arrived at the arena, the buzz of the crowd and the constant activity of horses and riders made Valor skittish. He tossed his head and snorted at every unfamiliar noise. Claire stayed calm, speaking to him in soothing tones as she guided him through the chaos. "Easy now. We're in this together," she murmured, stroking his neck. As their turn approached, Claire became aware of the curious glances from others. Many recognized Valor as the scrawny, unremarkable horse from the auction. "Isn't that the horse no one wanted?" she overheard someone near the railing mutter. "Yeah, but it looks like they've cleaned him up." "Still, don't think he's got what it takes," another voice replied, laughing. Claire clenched her jaw, shutting out the remarks. She knew the truth. Valor had come a long way, and so had she. Together, they were ready to prove the doubters wrong. Valor was far more than what they could perceive. When his name was finally called, Claire felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her. With steady determination, she mounted Valor and guided him onto the course. The layout was simple, yet demanded precision and trust. Claire took a deep breath, adjusted the reins, and gave the signal. Valor started with a confident trot that soon transitioned into an elegant gallop. The first obstacle, a low bar, was cleared effortlessly. Then came a higher jump. For a fleeting moment, Valor hesitated, but with a decisive push, he soared over it, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. Each leap, every turn, reflected the relentless work they had poured into their training. Though not flawless, the synchronicity between Claire and Valor was undeniable. For Claire, this wasn't about winning, it was about showcasing what they had achieved together. Crossing the finish line, the crowd erupted in applause. While some didn't grasp the full magnitude of their accomplishment, many recognized the dedication it represented. Claire leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Valor from the saddle, a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude swelling within her. In the resting area, other competitors approached to congratulate her. Among them was a young man named Michael, who studied her with curiosity. Claire nodded, stroking Valor's neck. "Yes, his name's Valor, and he's far more extraordinary than anyone imagined." Michael smiled, visibly impressed. "You were incredible. That horse has something special, and so do you." When the results were announced, Claire didn't expect to place highly. To her surprise, they secured third place. As she accepted her medal, she felt a shift within herself. It was no longer just about proving valor's worth, but embracing the journey they shared. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, Henry was waiting on the porch, his expression a mix of pride and tenderness. "I knew you could do it, kiddo," he said. "But this is only the beginning." Claire smiled, looking at Valor. "I know, Grandpa, and we're ready for whatever's next." With their first competition behind them, the path ahead felt clearer than ever. The days following the event brought a whirlwind of emotions for Claire, and the satisfaction of their success lingered, but so did the attention they hadn't experienced before. One morning, as Claire fed Valor in the stable, Henry appeared with a letter in hand. "This is for you, kid. Looks like you've caught someone's eye." Claire wiped her hands on her apron and opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation to participate in a regional jumping and dressage event, far more prestigious than the local competition. The invitation included a personal note from the organizer. "We want to commend your dedication and the evident bond with your horse. Valor shows remarkable potential, and it would be an honor to have you both as participants." Claire smiled, though a hint of nervousness crept in. Competing on such a grand stage meant facing the best, but it was also an opportunity to prove Valor's worth further. "What do you think, Henry read it carefully and nodded. "I think this is the next step. But be ready. The higher you climb, the sharper the eyes watching you will be." Training resumed with greater intensity. Claire hired an experienced coach, Albert, to help refine their technique. Albert was a stern but fair man who quickly recognized something unique in Valor. "This horse has heart," he said one day, watching Valor clear a jump. "But he also has an untamed spirit. That combination is rare. Make sure he never loses the trust he has in you. That's what sets him apart." The day of the regional event arrived faster than Claire anticipated. The venue was imposing, with grandstands packed with spectators and riders atop impeccably trained horses. Though nervous, Valor exuded confidence, his posture steady, his ears pricked forward, attuned to Claire's every move. As they warmed up, initially dismissing it, she soon recognized one of them, the auctioneer who had sold Valor months ago. "Is that the horse no one wanted to buy?" one of the men asked, astonished. "Yeah, but it seems she saw something we didn't," another replied. "Look at what she's accomplished with him." Claire pretended not to hear, focusing on her preparation. But before she entered the arena, one of the men approached her. He was burly, with a confident air that bordered on arrogance. "So," he said, his tone almost challenging, "you're the one who took a chance on that horse." "Excuse me, miss," said Richard, his tone polite but laced with purpose. "My name is Richard. I was at the auction where you bought this horse. I have to admit, I never thought he'd achieve so much. It's remarkable what you've accomplished." Claire nodded cautiously, her guard unwavering. "Actually," Richard continued, I'm willing to buy this horse for a significant sum. What do you say?" Claire raised her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "He's not for sale. Valor isn't just a horse to me. He's my partner." Richard smiled, unbothered, as if he hadn't heard her. "I could offer you more money than you'd ever make in these competitions. Imagine what you could achieve with a new horse, one with a better pedigree." Claire tightened her grip on Valor's reins, sensing the horse's subtle tension as though he understood every word. "No amount of money can buy what he and I have built together. Valor stays with me." Richard stared at her, incredulous, before shrugging. "Suit yourself. But remember my words. This kind of talent shouldn't be wasted." Claire watched him walk away, her feelings a tangle of pride and indignation. She knew the crowd's eyes were on her, some admiring, but she wouldn't let their opinions shake her resolve. When her turn came, Claire and Valor stepped into the arena with unwavering determination. The obstacles were higher, the course more challenging than anything they'd faced before. Yet Claire trusted her horse completely. With every jump and turn, they proved not only that they were up to the challenge, but that they could surpass it. The connection between them was undeniable. By the time they finished, the crowd erupted in applause. They didn't take first place, but earning second in their first regional competition was a triumph in itself. For Claire, the trophy mattered far less than the confirmation that she and Valor were an unstoppable team. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, Claire reflected on the day's events. She understood that success would bring more attention and inevitably more challenges. Yet no matter how many offers or criticisms came their way, Valor would always be more than a horse to her. He was her partner, her friend, and together they were ready to take on whatever came next. Claire and Valor continued climbing the ranks in the world of equestrian competitions. What had started as a personal dream was now blossoming into a remarkable career, their bond, the foundation of their success. Each event brought new lessons, a reminder of how far they'd come since that auction where Valor had been dismissed by everyone else. But with fame came challenges. After their regional event, whispers began to spread about the rejected horse-turned-champion. To some, their story was an inspiration. To others, it was met with skepticism. One afternoon, as Claire practiced in the ranch's corral, a sleek car pulled up at the entrance. Out stepped a tall man in an immaculate suit, a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings. "Claire," he called, his voice steady and firm. Claire dismounted, guiding Valor toward the fence as she studied the stranger with curiosity. "That's me. How can I help you?" "My name is Albert," he said, extending a business card. "I represent one of the country's most prestigious horse breeding establishments. I've been following your progress in the competitions, and I must say, I'm impressed. Your horse, Valor, is extraordinary." Claire accepted the card but didn't drop her wary demeanor. "Thank you. We've worked hard to get here." "That much is clear," Albert replied, with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Which is precisely why I'm here. My client is very interested in acquiring Valor. They're prepared to offer a substantial sum, more than any prize you might win in a competition." Claire felt her chest tighten. The offer was no different from the one she'd received at the regional event, but this time it carried a professional polish that unsettled her even more. Albert didn't seem fazed. "I understand your attachment to the horse, but think about what you could achieve with that money. You could buy a horse with a stronger pedigree, one that could elevate you to the highest level of this sport." Claire stepped forward, positioning Valor behind her as if shielding him. "Albert, I'm not sure you grasp what this horse means to me. He's not just a competition tool. He's my friend, my partner. Everything we've achieved, we've done it together. No amount of money can replace that." Albert studied her for a moment before shrugging. "That's a shame. Let me make one thing clear. In this world, emotions won't get you far. Greatness comes at a cost, and sooner or later, you'll have to decide if you're willing to pay it." With those words, he turned and headed back to his car. Claire watched him leave, anger. That evening, as she cleaned the stables, she recounted the conversation to Henry, who listened silently, leaning on the shovel he used to help her. "Men like that always show up when they see something that shines," he finally said. "But the real question is, why are you on this path, Claire? If it's for glory, they might sway you someday. But if it's for something more, then nothing they offer will ever make you doubt." Claire pondered his words, her gaze resting on Valor, who lay peacefully in his stall. Her expression softened as she recalled the times the world had turned its back on him and how together they had defied all odds. "I'm not doing this for trophies, Grandpa," she replied at last. "I'm here to prove that worth isn't dictated by others, and because Valor deserves to shine, not for them, but for himself." Henry nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. But remember, the higher you climb, the harder they'll try to pull you down." Claire knew he was right. As her reputation grew, so would the challenges, but she was resolved to protect what they had built, no matter the cost. With that determination, they continued their training, preparing for the upcoming National Show Jumping Championship. There, they would face not only the best riders in the country, but also the expectations and biases still weighing against them. To Claire, there was no greater satisfaction than proving time and again that Valor was far more than just a horse. He was a champion, both in body and spirit. The day of the National Show Jumping Championship arrived, charged with tension and excitement. For Claire, this wasn't just another event. It was an opportunity to prove that she and Valor belonged at the pinnacle of equestrian sport. The venue was grand, with towering stands packed with spectators and a lively buzz. The crowd fell silent as they reached the starting line. "Let's show them what we've got, boy," Claire whispered, gently patting Valor's neck. The whistle blew, and Valor surged forward in a smooth gallop. The first obstacle, a towering triple jump, loomed ahead. With a powerful leap, Valor cleared it effortlessly, drawing scattered applause from the audience. One by one, the obstacles yielded to Valor's skill and Claire's precision. Every turn, every jump was a testament to the tireless work they had put in. When they crossed the finish line with no penalties, the stands erupted in cheers. Number 47, Claire Martinez and her horse Valor, qualified for the second round with an outstanding time, the announcer declared. Claire let out a deep breath, a smile spreading across her face as she stroked Valor's neck. "We did it, boy. We really did it." In the resting area, she felt the mixed gazes of admiration and some approached her to offer congratulations, while others lingered at a distance, their skepticism evident in their expressions. Among those who came forward was Michael, a young rider she had met during the regional competition. "I knew you had something special, but this was incredible," he said with a genuine smile. "Thanks, Michael. It's all Valor. He does all the hard work," Claire replied modestly, scratching behind the horse's ears. The second round presented a much tougher challenge, with tight turns, intricate combinations, and intimidating obstacles. Claire watched the other competitors as they navigated the course, each demonstrating impressive skill. When her turn came, she felt the weight of the crowds and judges' eyes on her. This time, the pressure was even greater, but Claire reminded herself of what truly mattered, her bond with Valor. At the third obstacle, a complicated zigzag combination, Valor hesitated for a moment. With firm guidance from Claire, he regained his rhythm and cleared it cleanly. Claire's heart raced as they approached the final obstacle, a towering double jump designed to intimidate even the most seasoned riders. Valor galloped with unwavering determination, and with a powerful leap, they soared through the air, landing gracefully on the other side without displacing a single bar. The crowd erupted into cheers. Claire leaned into Valor, murmuring words of gratitude as the announcer revealed their time, the second best of the entire competition. When it was time for the award ceremony, Claire and Valor stepped onto the podium to receive their silver medal. Though it wasn't the gold, the achievement held immense significance for Claire. From the stands, Henry beamed with pride, while Michael clapped enthusiastically among them. Yet Claire also noticed familiar faces among the spectators. Richard and Albert watched from a distance, their expressions shifting between astonishment and envy. Holding the medal in her hands, Claire whispered, "This is just the beginning, Valor. Together we'll go even further." That night, back at the ranch, Claire and Henry celebrated quietly, gazing at the stars from the porch. For Claire, success wasn't about trophies or medals, but the unbreakable connection she shared with Valor. And that connection was unshakable. Months after the national championship, Claire and Valor had become well-known figures in the equestrian circuit. Their story inspired many, especially those who believed in second chances. But with fame came a surge of attention that tested everything Claire had built with valor. One crisp morning, while in his hand, he held a newspaper. "Claire, you need to see this," he said, handing her the paper. Claire dismounted and took the newspaper. On the front page was a picture of her and Valor from the last championship, accompanied by a bold headline, "The Rejected Horse, the Unexpected Champion, Everyone Wants to Own." The article recounted their rise in the competition world and included details about the auction where Valor had been overlooked. It went on to describe how several breeders and businessmen were now offering exorbitant sums to buy him. "They can't be serious," Claire muttered, annoyed. "Oh, they are," Henry replied. "Since you won that silver medal, everyone's got their eyes on you and Valor." Before Claire could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the ranch entrance. 3 men in tailored suits stepped out. Claire immediately recognized one of them, Richard, the man who had... "What do they want now?" Claire asked under her breath as Henry walked toward the men. "Stay calm, Claire. Let's hear them out. But don't forget who you are or why you're doing this," her grandfather advised before opening the barn door to meet them. Richard wasted no time, getting to the point. "Miss Claire, I understand we've met before, but today I come with a formal proposal. My client is prepared to offer you $5 million for your horse. This includes a contract for you to work as a trainer at our facilities." Claire crossed her arms, her stance unyielding. "I've told you before, Valor is not for sale. Not for $5 million, not for 10. It doesn't matter how much you offer." Richard smirked, the kind of expression worn by someone unaccustomed to rejection, especially when the stakes were this high. "Miss Claire, this isn't just a business deal. You could train other horses, compete on an international level. Why limit yourself to just one horse?" Claire felt the heat rising to her face. She stepped forward, pointing toward Valor, who stood watching them from the paddock. "Do you even understand what that horse means to me? When everyone else dismissed him, I saw what he was. A fighter, a champion. Everything I've accomplished has been with him, not because he has a perfect pedigree, but because he has heart. And that's something you will never understand." The men exchanged glances, visibly taken aback by her resolve. Richard made one last attempt. "We understand your emotional attachment, but feelings don't win competitions, Miss Claire. Think about it. $5 million. That's more money than you'll ever see in your lifetime." Claire took a deep breath, steadying herself. Valorally, she lifted her chin. "Valor is priceless. He's my partner, my family, and I will never betray him for money. So, if you're done trying to convince me, I'd appreciate it if you leave." Richard scowled, realizing there was nothing left to say. Without another word, he and his associates climbed back into their car and drove away from the ranch. As the sound of the engine faded, Henry burst into hearty laughter. "That'll give them something to think about. I doubt they'll bother you again." Claire managed a small smile, though her chest still buzzed with adrenaline. She turned her gaze to Valor, now galloping freely in the paddock, and walked over to him. When she reached his side, she rested her forehead against his and closed her eyes. "I promised to protect you. Remember? No matter what happens, we're in this together." Valor let out a soft snort. "Do you think I made the right choice?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the fading light. The old man adjusted his hat before answering. "The right choice isn't always the easiest or the most profitable, but if you can sleep at night knowing you didn't betray what you love, then, yes, you made the right choice." Claire nodded quietly. In her heart, she knew that Valor's true value wasn't in what others were willing to pay for him, but in everything they had built together. Years passed, but the bond between Claire and Valor never wavered. Though they didn't win every competition, they achieved something far greater, inspiring others to see the potential hidden in plain sight. Valor became a legend, not just for his performance on the track, but for his story of perseverance. Whenever Claire shared how she had bought him at an auction where no one else saw his worth, listeners felt. One day, after a quiet morning on the ranch, Henry approached with an old notebook in hand. Claire, brushing Valor under the warm sun, glanced at him curiously. "What's that, Grandpa?" she asked, setting the brush aside. "It's something you should start writing," he replied, handing her the notebook. "Your story with Valor. Not to brag, but so others can understand what it means to never give up." Claire opened the notebook, smiling at the blank pages. "Do you think anyone would want to read it?" Henry looked at her with pride. "Trust me, kid. That story could change lives." Inspired by his words, Claire began writing at night while Valor rested in his stall. She recounted every detail of their journey together, the auction, the grueling training sessions, the competitions, and the moments they almost gave up. But she also wrote about Valor's strength, loyalty, and how he taught her that a true champion. When the notebook was full, Claire decided to publish it as a book titled Valor, the Story of the Horse No One Wanted. The book became a sensation, not just among horse lovers, but for anyone who had ever felt underestimated by the world. Meanwhile, Valor enjoyed his retirement on the ranch. Though he no longer competed, he trotted energetically, played in the paddock, and basked in the affection of children who visited to learn about caring for horses. On one such visit, a shy boy approached Claire. "Is it true this is the horse from the book?" he asked, pointing to Valor, who grazed peacefully under a tree. "Yes, that's him," Claire said with a smile. "And no one wanted him?" Claire nodded, kneeling to meet the boy's gaze. "No one wanted him at first, but he was always special. He just needed someone to believe in him." The boy looked at Valor with awe. That night, as Claire gazed at the stars from the porch, Henry, now older, joined her. "Do you realize what you've accomplished, kid? Valor didn't just change your life. He's touched so many others. That horse became more than a champion. He's a symbol of hope." Claire glanced toward the paddock where Valor rested under the starlit sky. "He taught me everything, Grandpa. I don't know if I saved him or if it was the other way around." Henry smiled. Maybe it was a bit of both. That night, Claire went to bed, knowing she had fulfilled the promise she made to Valor from the very beginning, to protect him, care for him, and show the world his true worth.